When Perodua launched the Ativa, everybody thought that that was a jacked up Myvi, when in reality, that was more of a jacked up Axia. You want a jacked up Myvi? Say hello to the Perodua Traz. Now, the reason why I say this is more of a jacked up Myvi is because under the bonnet you find the same 1.5 litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder that you would otherwise get in a Myvi. Paired to that engine is the same DCVT automatic gearbox that you also get in the Myvi and the Ativa and the Axia. Now, this engine might not seem like the most exciting to you and I, but the simple fact of the matter is it is a dependable engine. This is one that has had near to no failures. This is an engine that can basically run on cooking oil if you wanted it to. Honestly, this makes a lot of sense given the fact that Perodua customers are ones that look for vehicles that are reliable and dependable on a day-to-day basis, and this engine, well, that'll probably outlast a nuclear war. Now, styling is subjective, but if you were to ask me, I do think the Perodua Traz is a pretty good looking car. Up front, you get full LED headlights replete with a proper projector LED beam as well as LED indicators. Here, you get LED fog lights on this H model, and you get this slightly smaller Perodua grille compared to what we've seen before from the Ativa and the Alza. And as far as I'm concerned, I do think that this does look quite good. It is worth pointing out the model that we have here has 0 gear up accessories, which means that this is the standard look of the Traz, which I think looks, again, very sharp. Now, there is one element to this car that I'm not a big fan of. These L-shaped inserts, that's fine, that's to be expected. These headlights, that's to be expected. The fog lights, that's to be expected. What is a bit weird is this panel there, which has this carbon fiber-like effect. Why? Now, down the side, the Traz H enjoys things like 17-inch dual-tone alloy wheels wrapped in Toyo Proxys CR1 tires. You also get black wing mirror caps here, as well as body-colored door handles with a touch sensor on both sides, which is a first for Perodua, and it's something that we certainly like a lot. Now, in terms of the rolling stock, because they are 17-inch alloys, it does make the car look a little bit underwheeled, especially with the very thick sidewalls. But I think that it's not the size of the wheel that's primarily the problem. I think that it's the design. Because so little of it is done in that diamond cut finish, it just makes the wheel look small. I think if this had like a flatter type design like we've seen from the Alza, for example, it might have worked a little bit better. Now, in terms of the overall sizing and segmentation, the Perodua Traz is very much a B-segment crossover, which means that this car competes against vehicles like the Honda WRV and HRV, as well as the Toyota Corolla Cross to some extent, as well as Proton's venerable X50, which means that in terms of the overall dimensions, you will find this car actually sits a little bit lower than an X50, but the wheelbase sits right bang smack in the B-segment crossover space. And if you again ask me, I do think that the design of the Traz looks complex enough that it looks interesting. At no point have I thought that this is an ugly car, not from any angle. It's just that, again, maybe slightly bigger wheels. At the back of the Traz, again, you get a lot of complex surfacing, which again makes this car look a lot more upmarket, a lot more premium, especially for a Perodua. You get full LED tail lights here replete with LED indicators, but they do not scroll. You get some contrast cladding down here, and you get the number plate mounted right in the middle. And as far as I'm concerned, again, this does look quite sharp. Now, if you get a gear up body kit, you do get a lower body kit edition as well as an extra spoiler here, which I think is completely unnecessary because I think that this, as it stands, is already a pretty good looking car. Now, the Traz back here actually has a couple of Perodua-firsts. First is a powered tailgate, and the second is a kick sensor. Not bad, huh? Now, behind the tailgate, this is the Traz's party piece because there is actually more cargo room back here than you get in an X50 or even a Honda HRV. In fact, this boot is bigger than what you get on a Toyota Corolla Cross. It is absolutely massive, which means that if you want to put 5 people's worth of luggage, that is no problem at all. On top of that, this boot floor is actually adjustable. So there is actually space underneath where I'm sitting now for you to put smaller items if you really want to hide them away, or you can lower the boot floor in its entirety in order to improve vertical space. But with the boot floor set up in its highest position, you can also fold the rear seats flat 60-40 for added practicality, but it is unfortunate that no matter what you do, there is no space for the parcel shelf. But at least this parcel shelf does come as standard, and it is the roller type of parcel shelf that you get on more upmarket cars compared to the fixed sort of cardboardy type that you normally get in a Perodua. It's quite clear that the Sungai-Chor-based company is really trying to punch above its weight, and I think that this car does a pretty damn good job. The inside of the Perodua Traz is actually a pretty nice place to be, and you can tell that there is a lot of very heavy Toyota influence in here. And that's because the Perodua Traz is actually based off of the Toyota Yaris Cross. There is no Daihatsu equivalent of this car, which means that Perodua had access to some really nice bits and pieces, and you can tell that from getting into this car. For example, this dash front is actually soft touch with stitching and more of this contrasting bits here. This red stuff all around here, that's all Perodua though. That extends all the way to here, and even the door cards are actually very soft touch. Up here, and even where you rest your arms with more of that contrast stitching down there. It's only this sort of little bit here that's a bit harder and scratchier, but then again, this is a place that's expected to have to handle a lot of wear and tear over the years. Even this here is soft touch, which means that when your knee rests against it or bangs against it over a long distance journey, it's not going to hurt. That's nice. Now beyond that, everything in here feels like a Perodua or sort of like a Toyota, for better or worse. Firstly, this head unit, this is very much a Perodua type affair with a very sort of simplistic interface to it, but it does at least come with wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. This instrument cluster also feels very Perodua, where you have a couple of analog dials with a multi-info display sat in the middle. No digital instrument cluster here because this is a Traz H. And AV does not exist. Moving further down, however, we actually get single zone climate control, which is a first Perodua if we discount the Perodua Ativa hybrid. So this is nice, but I know that there are some people who prefer the manual button type air conditioning systems that we used to get in older Peroduas, but I prefer climate control. Moving further down, there is a USB-C and USB-A port, as well as an indicator for your rear seat belt usage, as well as your start button here. Now, your lock and unlock buttons live here, which is a bit unfortunate because it feels like it's a little bit of like an afterthought kind of affair, this placement here, but at least this panel is actually grooved. There's a design to it, which means that when you touch it and you can feel it, you're like, oh, okay, this is kind of nice. Now, moving beyond that, you have an electronic parking brake, which has freed up enough space for a couple of very, very deep cup holders, which you can actually set to a dual level, depending on whether or not you have a deep or longer bottle or not. You have a cubby hole up here, which can be specified as a wireless charger for, I think, 350 ringgit extra via a gear up package, although that's pretty much useless since the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto is wired anyway. The glove box is of a decent size and it doesn't sort of flop down the way it used to. Older Peroduas used to just come down with a crash, but this is quiet. And you do have decently sized door bins big enough for a litre sized bottle without too much issue at all. Another first for Perodua is actually in terms of some of the ergonomic adjustments. So this seat obviously is manually adjusted, but you do have height adjustment and recline adjustment, etc., all to be expected. But the Traz takes it one step further with this, if I can find the lever, where now you can go up and down, but also in and out. Finally! Which means that you can actually get a very comfortable driving position in this car, which means that, again, the Traz is punching above its weight. Now, there are a couple of things in here which I know that a few people have complained about. Firstly, the material quality on the dash is mostly hard plastic, and some of these materials are a little bit sharp and the joinery is not as nice as you would expect from a Perodua item, but there we are. And the seats, however, only come in fabric upholstery. If you want these done up in a leatherette, you actually have to buy them extra from the Gear Up catalog. But as far as I'm concerned, in terms of overall specification and seating position and overall comfort, this is perfectly fine. And again, this is a car that comes in at 82,000 ringgit. This is all right. Now, in terms of other amenities, you do get a dash cam as standard. You have a centrally mounted rear view mirror here, which is not of the self-dimming variety. And of course, you do get some buttons here on the right that control things like your electric boot, as well as your ASA system and your parking sensors. And those headlights that I mentioned earlier are manually leveling with a little roller to control them here on the right. You can actually get this car with ambient lighting through a set of LEDs in the footwells as well as on the sill plates. And if you do that, you get an extra button here where it says RGB light. Not tasteful. Now, the most obvious thing in this car, however, is the steering wheel, which is nicely leather wrapped. It feels very nice to use, and you have lots of buttons here and down here. But of course, from this view, there's no doubt you would have noticed that this spoke is remarkably empty. And that's because this car does not offer things like adaptive cruise control or lane centering. It's got lane departure warning, but no lane centering assist, which means that this is just empty. Now, the reason why this is empty is actually because of Toyota. They've decided that they want all of the best goodies for their own car, I suspect, because I have a feeling that when they were developing this car, it should have come with all of the goodies that we've come to get used to from things like the Perodua Myvi and even the Perodua Attiva. The fact that this is empty and the fact that there is no AV model just feels like sometime at the last minute, Toyota probably said, by the way, you can't have nice things. This is unfortunate, and this to me, it's not so much of the usage of it, because in terms of the use cases of ACC and stuff like that, Perodua buyers don't really use that sort of technology very often, but the emptiness of this spoke is just really noticeable, and it's one of those things where in the last week I've driven this car, I can't seem to get over it. Sayang lah. In the back of the Perodua Traz, life is pretty good. I have a good amount of knee room and a good amount of headroom with the front seat set up in my driving position, about 170 centimeters. I've got a good amount of foot room and I have decent under-thigh support, which means that sitting here is very comfortable. In addition to this, I also have a couple of crotch coolers as well as a USB-C port to charge up devices, and the material quality back here is just as good as it is in the front, with this portion and this portion being soft, this portion being soft, and this hard plastic part, at least it's fluted, so it looks interesting. Now, in terms of rear accommodations, a third passenger might not be very comfortable because there is a little bit of a hump in the floor, and of course the seat itself is quite raised. But sitting on the two outer seats, they're decently scalloped enough, and because of the fabric upholstery, I am sat very sort of firmly in place, which is nice. Other nice things include pockets behind the front seats, as well as door bins big enough for a litre size bottle, and a Perodua-firsts, at least for a two-row vehicle from them. You have a deployable center armrest with cup holders, which actually floats in place and it feels nice and solid, which means that if you have two adult passengers back here, they could be very comfortable even for a relatively long journey. In terms of other amenities, there are ISOFIX mounts naturally, and these doors do open decently large, which means that you can or should at least be able to fit a rear-facing child seat without too much issue. Furthermore, these back seats are actually mounted a little bit higher than the seats in the front, which means that from here I have a very good view all the way around me. Overall, this is a very thoughtfully designed car, and it does seem to me that this car should appeal very well towards people who are not only empty nesters but also those with young families, because this does feel like the sort of high quality vehicle that you'd want to chauffeur and drive your family around in, especially doing day-to-day errands. However, the real surprise to the Traz, at least in the several days I've had this car, comes from the driver's seat, and you wouldn't believe why. And that's because despite what this 1.5 litre naturally aspirated plus CVT powertrain combo might suggest, the Traz is actually pretty fast. And I think that's down to the fact this car is quite light. So even though 138 Newton meters might not sound like a lot, this car gets up and goes with the urgency of a stabbed rat when you want it to. And then when you don't, it just sort of sits and cruises along very smoothly and dependably the way you'd expect from any Perodua. And that, to me, is great. That's exactly what you want from a car like this. Now, one of the things that I think has contributed to this car's slightly more urgent pace is the DCVT automatic gearbox. Now, Perodua won't tell me this, even though I've asked them several times, but I have a suspicion. In the few years since they introduced the DCVT automatic gearbox, which, by the way, made its debut with the Perodua Attiva, I think that they've spent a little bit more time sort of refining the gearbox and understanding it a little bit better in order to eke out the best possible performance from it. Because when we drove the Attiva, God, it must have been, what, 5 years ago? Whenever you went anywhere near the throttle in that car, the engine would start to howl before the car actually surged forward. That is what we refer to as the rubber band effect, which affects a lot of cars with CVT automatic gearboxes. And then when they use that CVT in the Myvi, again, we suffered from broadly the same problem, where the engine would begin to wail before the car actually does anything towards surging you forwards or pushing you forwards towards where you want to go in the speeds that you want. But in the Traz, it feels like they've reworked this gearbox in such a way that it feels significantly more responsive. Furthermore, as standard, not in sport mode, not in power mode or whatever, this gearbox is actually pretending to be a 7-speed automatic. And I say this because it actually shifts along the way at a very reasonable RPM. It doesn't let the car sort of go all the way up to the red line the way you would in, say, a Saga FLX or an outgoing Proton Iris. But it does so in a way that makes it feel very natural, which is exactly what you want, again, from a car like this. This is meant to be a consummate, everyday, everything car. And so you want this experience to feel as natural as possible. And I think that that's exactly what they've managed to achieve in the Traz. The same goes for the steering wheel. I'm so used to driving modern cars where you can change the way the car brakes and the way the car steers and the weight of the steering and whatever. In this, the steering wheel is a little bit heavier than you might expect in a Perodua, but it feels natural. At no point does this feel unwieldy or difficult or cumbersome. It's just nice. It just feels natural. That's nice. Now, once you do hit the open road, the Traz actually again does a little bit better. The suspension on this car, for example, is very, very well judged to iron out the worst lumps and bumps in urban settings. And then once you do hit the open road and speeds start to pick up, it allows this car to sit very confidently and cruise very confidently, even at speeds of up to 110, 120 kilometers an hour. And based on my experience with this car on the Perodua test track, it will also sit very comfortably and confidently, even at speeds of 140 kilometers an hour. Now, because this car runs on Toyo Proxys tires and because they have done extensive wind tunnel testing, I can say that this car's tire combination does help to keep road noise at a relative minimum. And again, very impressive overall for a car that is only about 80,000 ringgit thereabouts. The same goes for wind noise, which also keeps itself very well suppressed at speeds under 120 kilometers an hour, which means that if you do just want to cover distance in the Perodua Traz, it will do so very confidently. Now that leads me on to a couple of other areas. Firstly, I'm going to touch on fuel economy. Now, in the B-roll shots, you would see this car is averaging about 12-something kilometers to the litre, which is not a great number, particularly given the fact this car is claiming to be able to do 21 kilometers per litre. But of course, this is with the car idling during a shoot, which means that this is not exactly a number that's representative of what you'd expect day to day. Now, in terms of testing, this car has done extraordinarily well, because even on the motorway, covering a lot of ground at decent motorway clip, this car was still reporting about 17 kilometers per litre. And then when driven about in town through stop-start traffic and the sort of thing that you'd come to expect from day-to-day driving, it was still reporting about 17 kilometers per litre. Now, of course, I've no doubt that if you drive this car like a Catholic priest, you could probably get this car to do about 20 kilometers per litre, but that is not really representative of day-to-day driving, and Malaysians are a very impatient bunch, which means that testing it that way would also yield, again, unrealistic results. Which means that if you're comfortable with a car that does 17 to 18 kilometers per litre, then the Traz will do anything you want it to do. And because this car is so incredibly light and the DCVT has been reworked and refined over its various different applications, the Traz feels really nippy. Like when you put your foot down, and I'm not even talking about full throttle, we're talking about maybe half throttle, the car just hikes its skirt up and gets going. And it does so in a really convincing and kind of amusing way. It's just nice. It's nice to drive this car around. Now, that leads me on to the other sore point. When you're cruising on the motorway, it is very comfortable and refined and whatever. But when you're cruising, that's when you realize that it would have been a lot better had this car come with adaptive cruise control, or in fact, cruise control in general, just to populate this right spoke. And that's because, as I said, this car is able to cover ground very, very confidently, which means that I wouldn't mind driving this from KL to Penang without any issue at all. It's just that it would be a lot more pleasant to do so if the car was able to regulate its own speed. Now, it's very disappointing that this car doesn't come with adaptive cruise control. Really, it is really, really disappointing that this right spoke is empty and this car doesn't enjoy Perodua Smart Drive Assist the way we've seen in other modern Peroduas. The excuse that they're giving, the official answer at least, is the fact that this car began its development sometime in 2023, which means that at the time, this was the standard, the par for the course. But the thing is, I call bullshit because the Perodua Attiva was released in 2020, and that car gets adaptive cruise control, which means that there is no excuse that this Traz, which is their flagship model, mind you, doesn't offer the same system. The fact that that is the official answer from Perodua actually gives me the real answer, which is the specification of this car was signed off by an entity that wasn't them. If Perodua was given a choice, they would have thrown everything and the kitchen sink at this car because that's just what Perodua does. So the fact that their flagship model doesn't come with Perodua Smart Drive Assist features merely informs me that someone else told them that they can't. And the only other person in this equation is Toyota. Now, what that means is the Toyota Yaris Cross, when that arrives later, will most likely come with the features that we've all been looking for and hoping for and keeping our fingers crossed for in this Traz, which also means that that car should also offer the HEV or hybrid electric vehicle system that we've recently seen from the Toyota Vios. However, because of that Toyota badge on the nose and the Toyota badge on the steering wheel, that also means that you will have a Toyota price tag in the Toyota showroom. So, while this Traz tops out at 81,800 ringgit in Peninsular Malaysia without the two-tone bodywork, that means that for the Yaris Cross, or what is effectively going to be the Toyota Traz AV, well, expected price tag north of 100,000 ringgit. Now, that aside, if you're willing to overlook the fact that this car has been nerfed by an outside party, the Perodua Traz is actually a really, really good car. In the week or so I've been driving this around, it's just impressed me at every turn. The quality in here, the way everything has been executed, the build quality, the refinement is just so much better than you'd expect from any Perodua that's come before it. And compared to the Attiva, for example, yes, you might be losing a few features, but the car itself feels a lot more mature and a lot more grown up. This is what you want from a car. And the Perodua Traz is just incredibly impressive. Now, of course, if you want a car that does better fuel economy that you can currently buy right now at time of filming, then there is, of course, the Chery Tiggo Cross Hybrid. At just under 100,000 ringgit, that car offers all the goodies that you'd look for in this, as well as an electrified powertrain that does incredible fuel economy. Alternatively, if you're looking for something with a bit more punch and a bit more verve, there is, of course, the PROTON X50 with its new 1.5-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine with more power, more torque and greater refinement. But of course, that car will drink fuel like it's free. And so if you want something that's comfortably in the middle and somehow practical than everything out there, then there's the Perodua Traz. In any case, that concludes our review of the 2026 Perodua Traz H. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icons, and invite every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the links are in the description below, including the link to join our new WhatsApp channel, where you will join a legion of over 2,000 loyal followers strong. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and jangan bodoh.